Okay, so this is what I got going on now. I have trying to reconfigure the fender. In the process, this is a whole lot flatter on the top. I've had to pull it up in this direction quite a bit so that when this tire steers out that I don't have any interference. Usually when the tire rebounds, it's going to go up in this direction, kind of roll up and away, so it shouldn't be an issue once it gets up into this area. But I just wanted to make sure if you're steering out hard that it didn't hit these edges, and so I've got that up there and it's pretty clear. On the original 71, if you look at the top profile and you look down at the width, this is pretty much matched up down at this end. But believe it or not, even with this pulled up at an exaggerated angle, this is still probably about 1.5 inches, 2 inches away from being parallel from that. I'm just using that as just kind of a benchmark. It does pull quite a bit more shape into this area here. It's a little bit more exaggerated. You can see from that light line right there. The other thing that had to happen was the body line at the bottom. By pulling this in this direction up, this body line wanted to smile up. Now, trying to get it level. Now, the original, it goes downhill to line up with the lower body line, but in the rendering, Doug pretty much has this going straight across in this region here, this body line, before it kicks up at the fender hole. So I've had to section it here, cut it out, rework this edge, kind of just tilt it down until I've got this line level, and I'll have to rebuild this. This is not going to fit. Because it's a little wider at the bottom than it was originally. It's just it's not too bad. It's not too bad. It's what's got to happen for that tire to clear. I hate to get this thing all the way done, take it out for a spin, and have that thing scraping. I know from my Charger that not having the ability to take it out onto the road and road test it came back to bite me a little bit with the rear tire clearances. Even though I went back and reworked the areas, I had widened out the wheel holes to what I thought would be sufficient. I had to go back into those areas and narrow up the quarter panel lips even more and do some finagling after the car was done and painted. So every once in a while when I'm going down the road, I hit a bridge too fast, like a concrete highway bridge, and the car will take a dump down and I'll hear a little scrape from the tires. But that's all I have, but still it's annoying to know that I don't have the proper clearance that I needed. I don't think it's going to look too horrible, but like I said, this is what I need to do to make sure. And I hope that's enough. Well, I guess time will tell. Anyway, that's where I'm at right now, just trying to eyeball this thing and get this thing in the neighborhood it needs to get in to do the job it needs to do. So I went ahead and worked on establishing the perimeter of this piece that I have to remake. This is the piece that finishes out the corner. This obviously doesn't fit because everything's been moved out quite a bit. What I had to do here was I had to cut this back out of this piece over here. This is the flange that bolts to the roll pan, and so when you're taking off the entire fender, you'll be able to unbolt it at these 2 points where it secures to the roll pan, which is secured to this bottom bar. As far as the bottom bar is concerned, I extended the bottom bar with an L-shaped piece that has some captured nuts in it for just 1032. They're button heads, and they screw right into this flange here. So right now what that's doing is that's establishing the angle of this lower piece, because there's 2 screws here, so I twisted it and tightened these down. It's also keeping it level with the bottom of this bar, and it also gives me a target when I make this piece to come down from the top, and this will be the curve that I've established at the bottom, And now that I've established this curve, I can transfer this curve over to the other side. That just helps to establish that shape. This is a piece of aluminum that I've just pop riveted in here. This just gives me something to lean against when I put my piece on here. When I go to weld it up, it's you know, it won't be flimsy here. This is just gotta, I might have to rivet this. This is a little loose right now. So anyway, the on the bottom over here, you can see I've got this little Frankenstein Joker's style stitch smile going on here. This is a little piece that I had to add in order to get this body line. Since I pulled all of this up to clear the tires, I had to recut this line and get this going more or less back level. You know, the one on the 71, this line on the 71 goes downhill to meet up with the lower body lines, but the rendering shows this going straight across, so that's what I'm going to do here. I also almost completely forgot that in the rendering there's also a side marker light, which of course having the front end blasted off this car, there were no side marker lights with it, so I had to order a couple of side marker lights, and hopefully when they come in I'll cut those in, but that's not really a big issue except for visually making sure that they're in the right spot while it's on the car. I went ahead and mocked up the rear fender just to get a visual to see how that's going to look here. I have a lot of work underneath there that has to go on before I can even start really seriously attaching that piece. But it's also stitched on the top side of the fender here. So I'm trying to stabilize everything across the front of the fender and keep it from moving around, and I think I've got plenty of space now as far as the rebound and turning out in this direction. So anyway, that's where she sits at the moment. So got that corner in, which if you recall from earlier videos, like, I don't know, about a year ago or something, I had already done this job, and much to my chagrin, when I finally got the real wheels in, there wasn't enough space under the front fender to do the turnout. So there's a saying, my stuff is nice because I do it twice. Nah, that's a little bit of BS, but anyway. One of the things that, I don't know if I explained it to you earlier on how to make some of these complex forms like this, is just to start with a simple pattern that fills the area up. And of course it's a little oversized. Give yourself some room to move. A lot of these larger transitions here, there's like a fullness here. And most of the time, you can achieve them from, you start out with just a hammer. This is a Delrin hammer, and sometimes you get a wood mallet, and you would just beat those shapes out a little bit. And then I'll take them over to the English wheel, which a lot of people like to shape things with the English wheel, and you can do it, and it takes a long time, and it looks spectacular when you're done doing it. But most people don't know that the original use for the English wheel was a smoothing wheel. It's called a smoothing wheel. That's after you got done doing stuff like this with a hammer. And of course, some people would fold shrink these, but this is not that big of a shape that you have to worry about folding the metal in. And that's where this is an Echold shrinker stretcher. This is able to get in and bite the material a little deeper than your normal shrinker stretchers like this. And there's an old saying that a little bit of shrinking is better than a whole lot of stretching. And what that means is this shape over here, rather than try to mound this up over here and beat this metal up high to get this shape, it's easier to go in and draw in and shrink down all of this material at the base. Now that'll give you a somewhat faceted appearance, which then you go to the wheel and you smooth it out. And if you do need a little bit of a prominence, then you tap it out a little bit more, and say in an area you want a little high spot or a rounder transition. On the edges, the trickier thing on the edges is to stretch this material. So as you stretch it, it wants to wing out, because this metal's confined, and this area over here, the metal's spreading apart, so it causes it to turn out this way. Also, what happens is, once you get this thing not 90 degrees, but sort of 90 degrees to this face, as you stretch it, it'll actually start to turn the rest of this metal in this shape over here, because remember, now this is acting like a flange, and as you spread it, it wants to push the metal this way and then push the metal this way. This is a little bit, trickier, as far as, you have to go back and forth, and sometimes you overstretch it, and you can bump it with the shrinker and pull it down. But then you run this through the wheel and kind of smarten it up a little bit. But I'm no great metal shaper, but I can get the basics done to get me close to what I need. I'm pretty happy with that little transition there, because that's probably the most difficult little piece on the car so far, is that little deal right there, as far as sort of flying blind until you get it all in there. It's got to do a bunch of different things. It's got to roll up and away like this, and then roll under. It's got to align with the roll pan, so it's got to maintain that shape. Then it's got to swing around and maintain the shape of the side of the fender, which also rolls under, then it rolls up in a reverse at that seam right there. So a little bit of a tricky piece, and I work with 20 some other guys that everybody's got their own way of going about it. There's some, you can go on and get videos that show you how to shape metal, and there's specific techniques for doing it. I'm certainly nobody to teach that. There's some really high-end craftsmen who could show you exactly the specifics of how you should go about it in a very methodical way. But there was never any need for that in my profession. It was just get the shape done and get it on the car and get it out the door. So you have to do shortcuts and that sort of thing to get it done. But anyway, I just thought I'd show you this little corner here, and it's done. And like I said, 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward, and we'll just inch our way along here and get this front fender done. So I'm going to start this rear support with these 2 brackets that I've just made up that will support a profile that for a substructure that will guide the rear fender and maintain its distance off the side firewall. So just wanted to show you that real quick before I get too much further. Just thought I'd show you. I've trimmed off those 2 braces right there, and starting to work on what will be the reinforcement for the rear of the fender. And the bottom here where the rocker is, this is a piece that'll be behind the finished sheet metal. This is the part that actually bolts to the bottom of that bracket. So this will give me something to weld the sheet metal to at the base. It'll just lay over this, and of course in the front it'll hem around to the back side over here. So I just wanted to show you that piece right there. Still working on it a little bit. We have a few things to sweeten up on it, but I'll start building it up 1 brick at a time. In preparing to build this support for the rear of the front fender, I'm doing I have a shrinker and stretched piece of 3/4 inch metal here that I'll be using as a brace behind another brace that I'll show you in a little while. But I was trying to get the shape of the curve of the door in this direction and also in this direction with this piece of metal before I welded it into the other brace. And in a process, I was laying it up against this front of this door skin, and I saw that there was a flat spot from here to here, and then there was another flat spot from here to here. It wasn't a nice smooth arc once I laid this metal over there. So a little trick that I do that is pretty easy. You could use welding rod, you could use anything about that diameter. But what I'll do is, when I want to correct that little bit of problem in the door skin or a door gap, is I'll just take some, this is coat hanger wire, and I'll just weld it along the area that needs to be filled in. That way, I'm not trying to address that with Bondo, which could chip off very easily. That leading edge of both edges of the door skin should always be metal, so that it's as strong as it can be, and it's not susceptible to being chipped off. So just a little trick, just laying it on and tacking it, and then once it's all tacked on solid, then I'll just grind it off and blend it in and fix that up a little bit, correct any little flaws. Just thought I'd show you what these brackets look like now. I folded them back in this direction here to stiffen them up. I also went ahead and gusseted these. These were turning out to be too flexible. Everything was so flimsy here. These were causing this panel here to move all over the place. But anyway, I put a vertical face cap over here on that one, and this one over here, and that gives me something to attach to. That'll eventually, these are slotted here, so I can move this panel in and out. And then this panel here is also the sub panel. So this panel that I'm going to put in here comes down and will attach to here. I'll take a look at that panel. I'm in the middle of finishing making it up right now. This is the back side where each one of those brackets goes to. Here you can see the Cleco holes. I've had to move it around quite a bit. I've attached this 90-degree flange along here, and this allows this to become rigid, so it doesn't move in and out, and it also allows me to shrink and stretch it to match the shape of the door profile. So right now I'm just welding this last little bit, and then I'll be putting it on there to show you what that looks like in place. Alright, so this is what I've been beating and banging on, trying to get in place. It's a sub panel that goes behind the fender, and that plate that I put on before is locked to the bottom of the car, and then I welded this piece to the two standoff brackets that I have on the inside here through the face. Just rosetted them. For now I'll take it off and I'll weld those up a little bit better. But this gives me a lip to wrap my skin around on my fender. So I'll have to go through and make sure that the gap is good, and so that establishes the back side of the fender. So now I'll just have to continue on and start putting the pieces back on here. I've got this back piece roughed in a little bit, and also the lower piece, and then I'll have to fill in between here and that lower piece with a patch similar to what I did to the upper quarter panels. But it's moving along. A lot of checking that has to go on with this, because this flange has to sit back from this face, the thickness of the skin of the fender. So a lot of back and forth running the straight edge across here. So you can see it's just gives it enough room for that skin to go over and wrap around the back side of this and be hemmed over. So anyway, that's where I'm at with all of this, and that's it for now. Thanks.